So I've been trying to find the words and the ways to explain this conundrum. But when it comes to being a tarot reader, anyone can be a tarot reader, okay? The individual themselves could be classified and any gender in terms of tarot. So not every tarot reader is actually a messenger. Not every tarot reader is actually a psychic. And in other words, there are tarot readers that read for either lower energies or higher energies. So it's a spectrum, but it's also constrained by its own variety, if that makes sense. Like, it is as simple as reading cards and energy, but on an individual basis, it depends on intention, knowledge, and healing. A lot of tarot readers like to do it because it's a healing, I don't want to say quality, but it's a skill. It's a healing skill. It's a healing hobby. And I mean, I like to keep a cross around me, for example. So in terms of it being ritualistic or having boundaries is necessary, like protective measures is what you would consider ritualistic in itself. I mean, at this day and age, at this point, it's safe to say that everything is magical. And in terms of religion and spirituality, I think it's necessary to talk about these things because there is a wound between spiritualists and religion. And I think the best way to see it is a top-down approach. You know, everything has its point. I would see religion as like a point, and then not even like an umbrella, but one of my favorite tarot readers, EZ the Healer, I'm gonna call him out. I like him, but he made a good point, and it was, we have all these religions trying to trap the devil. That is the continuity. That is the exception. That is why there is variety, because when it comes down to it, it is about good versus evil, no matter what lens you see it through. It's still down to a fundamental level and shared fear and interest. In terms of collectively agreeing to what it means to even practice or associate, or, you know, that's why being open-minded is one thing, but also being genuine and authentic is another. And it's another thing because it is a religious route, but in to be fair, it is safer to take that route. There's less complication and more measures to one's humility. So you have more of a connection to your own perseverance. You know, you're not as disconnected in terms of allowing a safer option. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to diagnose or dissect everything to be right or safe. And I think that's where a lot of the dogma and stigma stems from, is that unknowing. But the thing is, you usually do know because you're finding yourself to question and be in said situations. But back to the whole tarot aspect. I really just wanted to talk about this because there is this idea that tarot readers are supposed to be advanced. But not only advanced, but they're supposed to either force that upon other people or even then be a, not even an oracle, but a future, a future teller. And the reason why I want to talk about that is because it's also about choice. To be a tarot reader is a choice, but to get a tarot reading or look into tarot readings is also a choice. So we live in a realm of choice. Like, a tarot reader could be a fortune teller. And, you know, let's just realize there's different categories of fortune tellers. You know what? I think that could be good luck. But there's different categories of tarot readers. And they all serve different purposes. And it's beautiful. You know, there's true crime messengers, there's love readers, there's relationship readers. You know, it gets specialized. And in reality, there are psychics with, you know, the clairs and the intuition or heightened intuition and seers. You know, it's a spectrum and it comes down to the individual. It's like, what do you see, what do you know, and what are you learning? What do you see, know, and are coming into / learning? And to come into learning is to come out of having learned something else. So that's kind of how our brains work. So, in other words, it's not about giving up or feeling like it's a gamble to communicate through energy, because that's all a reader is really doing. And channeling also is a part of it. So, could you technically call a reader that picks up on spirits and ancestors a necromancer? You know, those are questions that you should be asking. But at the same time, you got to realize you're asking that question. You're needing to look into why it makes sense for you. It is not illegal. I used to have this problem, and I'm honestly glad I have it. But I have a filter, okay? People that used to know me would probably assume I have weird interests, or even then kind of morbid interests. But no, my interests stem from a place of empathy. Like, when I'm interested in things, it's usually because I want to emotionally either understand it, or even then I'm just drawn to it emotionally. Like, understanding comes later on once you really realize those things. But I have a filter, so I don't like to think about the worst case scenario, actually. Like, no. When it comes to picking up on energies and having mood shifts and swings, I've had to learn the difference between hormones, my energy, and the reason I pick up on other energies, you know? And it's not a strict environment. I think that's a mistake people make. They make it a strict thing. They make it a routine to either see if they have abilities, or they conjure up an environment to develop those abilities. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just when you're doing all those things, but you're forgetting there's good and bad, then you're missing the whole point of even associating on that spectrum. Because it is a quote-unquote veil, but at the same time, there are certain people that have also had that veil taken from them unwillingly. So you need to see those differentiating factors in terms of not necessarily being advanced or unadvanced, but in relating to what it means to develop a relationship with said abilities. I'm not really on the ability spectrum when it comes to those things because I just like my cards. I've been doing tarot since I was 16, but I thought it was a personal thing. Like, if I'm being honest, that's what I'm saying. Like, when you're a natural at these things, you don't even realize it's mainstream. Like, I guess at the time that I got into it, it honestly wasn't mainstream, and I kind of felt like I was too young to enjoy that aspect, I guess you could say. But like I said, if you're naturally someone that can have, lucid dreams and you just have heightened senses, there's like up to like, I think 27. Hold on, let me see how many clairs. Let me be accurate. Okay, there's typically 8 core ones, but I've seen a lot more than that, if I'm being honest. Like, it gets deep. So it's really just about interest, because you could be a tarot reader and you're not really interested in the clairs, or even then, it's not a strong suit. And I just want to say, it is realistic to go through periods of not even low energy, no, of dormancy. Like, your abilities are not always going to be active. And we gotta understand this as a community, because instead of stressing about people not getting it, because I do also, I think it's about integrating that wound of people not understanding also. But I just wanted to talk about something real, the real aspects of not even just messages, but tapping into energy is a whole other aspect also. I wanted to just point that out because I channel, so when I get messages and I get a, hey, I'm an ancestor, and that is a, okay, sit down, allow that energy to exude into said reading, and that is the form, that is the relationship in that moment. So that's the difference. It's not like, oh, let me sit down and do a reading on this one person I knew. I've maybe done that like 1 to 4 or 5 times, and I want to be honest about that, because that is a part of realizing what it means to either tap into someone's energy or just read what is given to you. And tapping into someone's energy is a whole other concept that I myself don't even like to think about. I haven't even really gotten into it. Like, if, thinking about someone and then pulling cards on them is that, then I can agree with that. But I don't even do that. Like, I could do it, but I feel it would just mess up my day, I feel like. Like, that's another thing you need to consider. It's like, yeah, you're still alive. You're still a human, I think. Depends on, do your research. But you still have morals and standards and boundaries. You're not just like, I'm pretty sure there are free-for-allers, and you know what, to each their own. But that's why it's up to you as an individual to differentiate what that would mean, why it's more like, why is it happening, what would that mean, and what can you do about it. Ask yourself questions in threes if you have to, or if you even have to look at it that way. So I feel like that just kind of shines a light on not only the effort and energy it takes to allow a bigger understanding, but also when you want to build your own community or you realize what kind of community you're in, it helps you see yourself and others better.